Hey, I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of Grace, Grit, and Grounds. So, this is a different episode, and it wasn't one that I was originally planning on giving. In fact, my original draft for the script that I had at the beginning of the week is something that I was just having some frustration wanting to go through with it. It wasn't a bad script. It was just, I think it was a little more, I don't know, a little blasé, maybe, a little bland. And it wasn't a reflection of where my soul is at this time of the year. And you'll probably notice that, well, I don't really have a cup of coffee today. In fact, I've had way too much caffeine already, and I just don't need to go any further down that caffeine rabbit hole. Uh, but if you have a cup of coffee and you want to have a conversation, and you want to have a discussion about some honest feelings at this time of year that I'm having, then I encourage you to grab yourself a cup and have a seat, and let's just have a bit of a conversation. This is January. In fact, normally I try to have my videos out on Thursdays, and I put this off because I didn't want to record the video, but I did want to. It was a weird sort of push and pull that my brain and my soul was going through. I wanted to do the right thing. I also wanted to be honest and true. And here's the truth, take it for what you will. I don't always know what I'm feeling. I wish I did. It'd make my life a lot simpler. The title of this episode was going, and probably still will be, The Work That Forms Us. But January's kind of like this for me. It's a tough month. Um, there's a weight that shows up around this time. It doesn't always announce itself. In fact, my brain does everything it can to forget about this month, which is frustrating because it's my wife's birthday month. And so, I have competing issues. I want to celebrate her, but at the same time, I don't want to celebrate anything. Honestly, there's no date circled on the calendar. Um, there's just this heaviness that approaches me in increasing waves as I get to the middle of the month, and it doesn't explain itself. And sometimes I completely forget why the weight is there, why the heaviness starts to build, and then it comes back to me, and I remember, and I don't want to remember anymore after that. I know why the weight is here. I know what my mind is doing. My soul knows, but my memory just refuses to hold the details. I don't remember the day my nephew died. I don't remember the day my parents passed. It's like my mind refuses to remember the day. I remember the season. I remember the time. I remember the month mostly, but there's a weight there, and it's a weight that I struggle with. Somewhere along the way, my brain has learned to push details out of my head so that I can keep moving forward. I understand it, and for the most part, I'm grateful for it, but I'm also frustrated by it all the same. It's weird how our brains do what they do. I've spent the last decade of my life studying trauma, studying grief and loss so that I could be a better minister, better pastor, better friend, better husband, better father. And I find that it doesn't matter how much I know in my brain, I still have to go through the grieving process. And the thing about the grieving process is it doesn't stop, it doesn't go away. I'll be grieving probably the rest of my life for the things that I've lost. I'll be honest, as time goes by, sometimes the memories and the exact feelings fade, but it doesn't take much to bring them back to the surface. I remember the last time I spoke with my mother, and I remember trying to call my father the day he died, not because I was worried about him passing. I just hadn't spoken to him in a few days, and I wanted to touch base with him. I was trying to see if he might be willing to come up and spend Christmas with us. We were living in Alaska at the time, and I knew that he had things that he was doing to help my sister and my brother, but I did call him the day he died, but he didn't answer. I don't know even know if the phone call went through. Sometimes in his house in New York, the signal wasn't always so strong, and sometimes it didn't go through. And I would call and it would go to voicemail. I was paying for my father's phone bill at that time, and I did it for a lot of reasons. One is because I love my father and I wanted to be a blessing to him so that he wouldn't have to worry about that bill and he could play his tap tap games and be available to talk whenever he wanted to. And it just gave me an opportunity to connect with him and know that no matter what, his phone would always be on. For 2 years after my father passed away, I kept paying the phone bill for his phone. I don't know if anybody knew that, but I kept it because occasionally I like to call and let it go to voicemail just so I can hear his voice again. Grief is messy. Loss permeates everything in our life. It changes us. It's like when we pour epoxy into cracks in wood, which I'll talk about in a little bit. It gets into those cracks and it fills into everything. Sometimes it's the reason why we struggle to get out of bed and move. Sometimes it's the very reason that we keep moving forward. I don't always understand it, but I know that even when the memory fades, there's a weight that we carry in our souls and it's still there. I didn't think it was going to be that tough, even to make this video now, but it is. In a few moments, I'm going to uh, move to the shop, and I'm going to share a bit more of my story and my time, but I'm not going to do it in front of the camera. Not really. I'm going to do it in a safe place where I can grieve and I can shut the audio off and pause the video for a minute and let the emotions catch up to where I'm moving towards. The episode isn't going to be about details. I'm probably not going to go into any of the details of my particular losses. But I think what I want this episode to be about is about the things that form us, the work that makes us, the times when the grief threatens to overwhelm us and our desire is to pull back, to turn away, and to stop, to shut down. That's not the right way to do it. I know that. I know it. I know it. But I don't always act on it. My first instinct is a turtle. Pull in, shut down, pull the covers over my head, ignore the universe. Maybe it'll go away, you know? I want this episode to be about what we do when grief shows up, no matter what we do, no matter what steps we take to protect ourselves, what goal that we've set for the day. And I just want to have an honest conversation. So let's head to the shop, my happy place. There are seasons in my life where words just fail me. It doesn't happen often, but sometimes it does. It's during those times when prayer feels a bit thin for me and answers don't readily come. When the only thing I know how to do is to put my hands to work. I had some bits of wood left over from other projects and other things in my shop, and I wanted to just pull them out. I've been saving them for this particular time because, well, winter in Kentucky is a little different than what I'm used to from Alaska and other places I've been. Some days we'll have, 13, 14, 15-degree weather with snow coming down, ice forming on the road. Other times, well, we'll have uh, we'll have 50-degree weather. And so we were going through a bit of 50-degree weather, and I thought maybe I could just finish up some of my projects. I pulled out a piece of red oak that I've been toying with, wanting to work with, but I was kind of afraid to turn it. As you can see, it's got a bit of just bit of tear out. And as I put the chisel to the block of wood, well, the unthinkable happened. Well, it popped off. It decided that for whatever reason, it did not want to be worked. And that's fine. It happens. That's the nature of wood turning, is sometimes you've got to readjust, reassess, and sometimes move on to a different project. In previous episodes, I have talked about my love-hate relationship with red oak. Well, sometimes I find it to be a stubborn wood, and a type of wood that, it just frustrates me as much as I think I frustrate the wood. And today was no exception. As I was turning it, I realized, today is not the day to do that. I have a few other projects that I wanted to work on. In fact, this is what we call limba blackwood. I believe it comes from Africa. I've been wanting to turn this board into a set of plates. I have 5 boards cut, so I'd like to make this a set of at least 4. I always plan just in case one of them doesn't work out like it's supposed to. And I want to make them roughly the same shape, same process. I'm going to have to do this sort of over and over again to really bring out the grain and the essence that I'm trying to bring out. I've never turned limba blackwood before, but I found this board and I just fell in love with the grain. You can see as it's spinning here, it's just it's definitely got an odd shape to it. And I'm always looking for wood that has character, wood that looks like it's lived a little bit, that it's had a story that's bigger than the board that it is now. And this is no different. I typically start mine not on a bandsaw like some woodworkers do, but I started on the lathe and I go from a square to a round. And there's just something, I don't know, soothing about the process as I begin to turn this board into something special. But at the same time, I get a little nervous about it, to be honest with you, because, well, sometimes these things don't stay stuck to the little block of wood that I glued to the back of it, as you saw with the red oak. And I get a little worried that maybe the turning process is going to be too much pressure, too much tension. So I stop periodically to adjust the strength, to make sure that it's holding tight. And I just felt for whatever reason that this particular piece needed to have a little extra support. Um, so I decided to pull the tailstock up to give it the support that it needed because I didn't want this to fly off like my red oak did. Sometimes I think this is how life is. And when I'm turning this, I had gotten it mostly into round, but I was still worried about it popping off the glue. And I needed to put some pressure on the backside to get the bottom of the plate in the kind of shape that I want. And since I'd never turned limba before, I didn't really know what to expect. And so I just felt like I needed an extra bit of stability. I don't always do this with my pieces. And you have to know I'm not a hardcore serious woodworker. I'm a hobbyist at best. I'm more of an artist than anything. And I know I don't do things always the right way. And so if you are a woodworker, please don't get frustrated watching me turn because, well, it'll probably frustrate you. But I just need a little extra stability. I was really worried about the pressure I was putting on the back side of it. And so I spent a little bit of time working on the back side of this before I got to the interior part of the bowl. Now that that's done, I guess it's time to go ahead and get to the fun part of the bowl. I'll be putting a lot of pressure on the front side of this, so I didn't need the tailstock anymore. But like I was talking about earlier, there's just something grounding about repetition. When I work with students in the special education program, the one thing that we talk about all the time with kids, and I guess this is true for any class, regardless of special education or not, is that ritual and routine, repetition is, well, the important things. The reality is that that's the best way we learn. It's how we exist. It's what we need to do as humans. A wise old wood turner once told me that if things aren't working the way you want to with a project, then maybe you need to readjust, re-examine your tools and make sure everything is sharp, everything is tight, everything is focused, and then get back to it. I noticed that as I was turning this with my square rougher that it was catching on the bottom of it. And I had recently went and purchased a new set of tools, some new gouges that I think would work really well for my upcoming projects. And I wasn't quite ready to pull out the rounded bowl gouge, but I also knew I needed to do something to sharpen my square tip that I had. So in the process of trying to sharpen it, I had to pull the bit off. And when I did that, I accidentally dropped the screw that held the blade onto my bowl gouge onto the ground. And it got lost in the sawdust. And I still can't find it to this day. And so my project really wasn't starting off the way I wanted. Everything seemed to be going wrong. I couldn't help but think about how this is very similar to probably how I am when I'm being formed spiritually by God. I wonder how many times that he has had to readjust, get a different tool, refocus, make sure that I'm snug and tight in the chuck so that when he starts to really turn me and shape me the way he wants to, uh, that it comes out right. I decided to go ahead and use my rounded tip, and I went ahead and started drawing out the center of this plate that's really just a shallow bowl. And you can see as I'm pulling in here, the grain is really starting to come out. But the problem with the grain is that that little bit of black with the white, it's a transition in the wood. And the transition doesn't want to be shaped. It doesn't want to be turned because it's a little softer. It's not quite like the rest of the wood. And it resists. And so I had constantly have to stop and readjust and refigure out where I'm going with this. But you can see the grain starting to really take shape, if you will, as I'm just going to town with this. The back of my mind, I'm still frustrated at losing that screw. I'm not happy with myself, and I know that I'm going to have to deal with that eventually. But I'm trying to lose myself in this project. I'm trying to create something that I know is going to be great, but my mind keeps getting distracted by other things. Eventually, I decide it's about time to pull out my old and faithful wood turning friend, my sandpaper. Sometimes when you're turning a piece, you can only just take it down so much with with a bowl gouge, and you need to break out the sandpaper. This is when I pull out the 100 grit. Sometimes I'll go as low as 60, but I felt like it was in a state where I didn't need to go as far down as 60. So I started off with 100, and I just decided to go ahead and start knocking off the tool marks, getting the piece like I want it to. And I think this is what takes the longest whenever you're shaping wood on the lathe, and that is the sanding process. I have to go through quite a bit of sandpaper, and the unfortunate thing I noticed that uh, I'm kind of running out of sandpaper on the different grits that I need, the ones that I use a lot, which are the lower grits. I have plenty of 60 and I have plenty of 80. I even have a bunch of 100. 150 is when I start getting uh, thin as far as my supplies go. And after that, I'm all out of 220. And I know if you don't know much about woodworking and sandpaper, then this probably doesn't have a lot of meaning to you. But um, so I have to spend a little extra time with the 150 because I know the next one up that I have is 320. And that's more for polishing, less for taking down the tool marks, which is what I'm trying to do. I'm trying to get this to where it starts to have that mirror-like finish. I do notice that it's evening time and the sun is setting, as you can tell, and I know my light is getting limited, and I wanted to get this project done, at least this plate, before the sunset. With the sanding done, it's time to do my favorite part of any project I turn on the lathe, and that is putting the oil on. I have one more plate I want to finish up before the sun sets, and I know it's going to be beautiful. But this is the part that I live for. This is the part that I enjoy more than any other part in turning the bowl. This is what makes the project worth it. This is when I get to put the oil on and let the true character come out. Sometimes I feel like this is the moment that the wood really finds salvation, when the Holy Spirit, if you will, comes in and breathes life into this piece. I use a little bit of mineral oil that I have mixed with some beeswax because I expect that this will probably be used for, well, potentially something that might be eaten off of, and I want to make sure that it'll work with allergies and whatnot. I don't want to cause any problems, but there's just something special about turning a piece like this and bringing the life it needs into it. So one down, 4 more to go. As you can see, the grain just pops with that oil and the wax, turns it into something that is truly amazing. It's fun to find a piece of wood that other people may have set aside, didn't think that had any potential, and turn it into something. I decided to go ahead and knock out this last one for the day. I knew the sun was setting and I wanted to get through it quickly, and I have a little shop light that I can shine on the interiors, so I quickly worked on the second one. Now that I've turned the limba black once, I knew I could do it again. I understood now the difficulties. Doesn't mean that I didn't still have problems. I do, but I was able to work through those problems pretty quickly and come to a resolution with the piece. I went ahead and made this part of the video a little faster so we could get to the fun part, the sanding. Now that the shape is the way I want it, I go ahead and pull out my favorite sandpaper to knock the tool marks off. I decided to go a little bit lower after looking at the way the first one reacted. Use an 80 grit to start off with, and I needed to get the tool marks off of it. I need to make that bottom of the plate smooth. It doesn't take long, and I'm able to really get it sanded the way it needs to be. But this really is the fun part. And if I'm honest, the longest part of the build. Typically, I like to take my bowls and plates at least to 800 grit. Sometimes I'll go as high as 2000. Today, I'm planning on just taking it to 800 because while this limba wood is pretty dense, the grain is pretty tight, and it's already polishing up to a mirror shine at 320 and then 400. So I'm pretty positive that by the time I get to the 800 grit, it's going to be the way I want it. I'm still enjoying the way the light shines on the grain as we bring it into focus. The next morning, I decided to go ahead and work on the tabletop that I want to eventually be in the church vestibule. When I found this piece, I was truly impressed. It's hickory, and I got this from a mill in Indiana. They sold it to me at a discount because of this crack that you see right there in the camera frame. It runs deep all the way through, and it sort of works its way from the pith. If you don't know much about trees or woodworking, that probably doesn't mean a lot to you, but you got to know that pith, that center of the tree is where there's a lot of natural tension. It's where the tree, the wood, the slab wants to pull apart. And sometimes when the slabs are cut, they split like this. I also had finished another bowl the previous day that I didn't put on camera, and I wanted to put a little epoxy in the bottom of it just to give it that finishing touch. Well, when I saw this piece, not the bowl, but the slab in the lumber mill, I knew that I had to have it. Not because it was perfect, but because it wasn't. I knew that this piece could be redeemed. So I mixed up some epoxy, some greenish blue with a little bit of gold. My desire wasn't to hide the crack, but to stabilize it, to let it become part of the story instead of the reason why it was discarded. When it's finished, this table will sit in the front of our church, and who knows, people will set their hands on it, they'll lean on it, they'll walk past it, maybe pick up their bulletins that are resting on it. Whatever they're doing, they'll probably not even notice much about it, and they'll walk past it without ever knowing what it survived, what it had gone through. The funny thing about cracks like this, though, is that when you're trying to fill the cracks in, it's not always easy. It takes time, and I have to pour several times because when I put a bit of the epoxy in and I squeeze it into the cracks like I'm doing with my scraper, it has to filter in and flow into every part of that crack, and the crack goes all the way through to the bottom of the slab, and so it takes several pourings, several scrapings. I have to let it sit for a minute and then pour it all over again, just to make sure that I get it deep down inside so that this epoxy will get into every part of that crack to stabilize it completely so that it won't have any problems in the future. Now that the epoxy is poured, it's time to move to my final project. I know I've been working through quite a bit with you guys today, but well, I just needed some time in the shop. I needed some time to process my emotions, my feelings, my thoughts. This is a rough season for me. My final piece that I wanted to work with is, well, it's going to be a bowl, but it's a piece of spalted spruce. It's one of the last pieces that I had brought with me from Alaska. I had forgotten about it, to be honest with you. I'd started it about a year and a half before, and I'd had some problems with it. As I mentioned, sometimes my tools just aren't as sharp as they need to be. And when I first started working on this project, my bowl gouge just wasn't what it needed to be. And I kept causing these chip outs on the bottom of the bowl. You can't really see it, but I put some epoxy on it to kind of seal it and stabilize it. And then I sort of threw it in the back of the shop and let it dry and just sort of forgot about it. I forgot that it was even there. And but I needed to put a tenon on it so that I can flip it around and do the interior. And So I put it back on the lathe and used the faceplate and got the bottom of it to where it's starting to look like it needs to. It'll take some sanding, but it's as shaped as it could be. Now that I've got it back on the lathe, and you can already tell just by looking at it that it's going to be beautiful, but there's also problems. You notice that knot that's almost right in the center of it. Well, that's the one that was giving me problems on the back side of it. And now I've turned it around and it's going to give me problems on the front side too. With a new blade in my rougher, my square-tipped bowl gouge, it's time to start hogging out some material, and I can already tell you that it's fighting me every step of the way. Spruce isn't nearly as strong and hard as red oak, but it's even more resistant, I think, at times. And the spalting in this doesn't make it any easier. I'm going to slow the video down so you can see it as I'm working on trying to get some of the material out of it so that it can have that bowl shape. I don't know if you can see it, but my hand is jumping because the bowl is resisting me. It's going deep and causing some scars and some marks on the bottom of it. It really comes down to the soft places in the spalting and that knot. It keeps getting in my way. It's frustrating the heck out of me. I know that this piece is going to be beautiful. I know it's going to be what I want it to be if it will only work with me and not cause problems in the turning. Now it's time to pull out my rounded bowl gouge and start doing some serious shaping on the bottom. It's time to turn this ugly block of wood that's been kicking around my shop for a couple years into something that's going to be a piece that I'm going to talk about for a while. I don't know what my bowl will become. I give a lot of my bowls away. Some of them I sell. But I have to think that when I'm giving a bowl to a person, that it's going to sit on their desk or their shelf or maybe their bedside nightstand. And when they look at it, they'll think about the craftsmanship. Maybe they'll think about me. That's part of the reason why I come to the shop. Because I need to process my feelings, and this is the best way that I know how to do it. I usually put my headphones in. Sometimes I listen to a book. But today, I just needed some music. I put on my favorite country music playlist, and I just wanted to not think about things, to not get into anything heavy. I wanted to make something beautiful. I wanted to take a piece or a project or something and just create something with it. I can't speak to anyone else's condition but my own, and for me, I feel like this is part of being a man, part of being a maker, part of being a father and a husband and a pastor. It's dealing with the weight that we carry. It's not easy. Jesus says that his burden is light. He says that he'll carry it with us. He says that he loves us with an intensity that outshines the sun itself. I don't always remember that. I don't always think about that. Most of the time, I'm just moving forward. Sometimes I have a direction that I'm going. Sometimes I have a spot in the past I'm just trying to move away from. Maybe today is a little bit of that. Maybe a little bit of both. Maybe I have a goal that I'm shooting for. And maybe I have a place in the past that I want to move away from. As I've said before, this is my favorite part. This is the oil. This is the time that the grain comes alive and the color deepens. When what looked dull and tired suddenly remembers what it was made to be. There's something about that moment that feels like grace. It's not dramatic. It's not loud. Just patient. the kind of grace that meets you after you've been sitting unfinished on a shelf for a while. It's kind of how I feel today. I don't share any of this because I have all the answers. In fact, most of the time I don't. I share this because this is how I survive certain seasons. I don't always get the catharsis through words. Sometimes it comes through motion, through making, through staying present to the task in front of me when bigger questions feel too heavy to carry or deal with. God has a way of meeting us there, in the work, in the repetition, in the quiet act of finishing something that almost didn't make it. If you're carrying something this season that doesn't have a name, you're not broken. If your memory protects you, that doesn't mean you're avoiding healing. Sometimes it means healing is happening slowly, underneath the surface. The work that forms us doesn't always look spiritual. Sometimes it looks like turning a bowl, filling a crack, sharpening a blade, showing up again and again and again. And somehow in all that work, God is shaping us too. As we come to the end of the episode and as you watch the final bits of this bowl come to life, I want to remind you that, well, the coffee is still warm. The work still continues. I'm glad you're here with me. As always, grace builds what grit sustains. I thank you for joining me for this episode of Grace, Grit, and Grounds. I encourage you to like and subscribe. See you next week.